Everyone imagines vampires the same way. A lonely traveler, a dark alley, a full moon, sharp fangs, a sudden attack. Then, another victim disappears into the night. Movies made vampires look like monsters that killed anyone they happened to find. Reality, at least according to the oldest legends, was far more terrifying. Because vampires didn't choose victims randomly. They watched. They waited. Sometimes for weeks. Sometimes for years. The oldest Eastern European stories never described vampires as mindless hunters. They described them as patient predators, creatures that studied people long before making their move. The year was 1734. Deep inside the Carpathian Mountains, a tiny village sat surrounded by endless forests. Only 60 people lived there. Everyone knew everyone. Every birth, every wedding, every funeral. Nothing remained secret for long, except what happened after sunset. As darkness settled over the mountains, every window closed, every door was locked. Children were called inside before the church bell rang. No one walked alone after nightfall, not because of wolves, not because of bandits, but because of something far older. The villagers never spoke its name after dark. They believed names carried power, and some things listened. A young schoolteacher named Elias arrived in the village just before winter. He had traveled from the city. Unlike the villagers, he believed only in reason, science, medicine, logic. The stories about vampires amused him. They're only old superstitions, he laughed. The village priest didn't smile. I once believed the same. Elias looked surprised. You? The old priest nodded, until I buried the same man twice. Elias laughed politely. Surely, the old man had become confused, or perhaps grief had clouded his memory. Either way, dead men stayed dead. That much he knew. The villagers watched Elias carefully during his first week. Not with hostility, with concern. Because newcomers always made the same mistake. They ignored the warnings. The first rule was simple. Never answer a voice calling your name after midnight, even if it sounded like someone you loved. The second rule, never invite strangers inside after sunset, no matter how cold they appeared. The third rule, never follow lights into the forest, especially if they moved. Elias dismissed every one of them. He had read books. He understood hallucinations. Fear made people imagine impossible things. That evening, he noticed something strange. Every family placed fresh garlic beside their windows. Some hung crosses over their doors. Others scattered tiny seeds across the entrance. Children helped without asking questions. Everyone performed the ritual exactly the same way. Elias smiled. Old habits. Nothing more. The next morning, he visited the village cemetery. It was larger than expected. Far larger. Weathered stone crosses stretched across the hillside. Some graves were ordinary, others were different. Heavy rocks rested directly on top of them. Iron chains wrapped around several coffins buried beneath the earth. One grave had been surrounded by thick wooden stakes hammered deep into the ground. Elias knelt beside it. The inscription had almost disappeared. Only one sentence remained readable. He was buried 3 times before Elias could examine it further. The village gravedigger appeared behind him. You shouldn't stand there. Elias turned. Why? The old man refused to step closer. Because that one was never empty. Elias raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? The gravedigger quietly looked around to make sure nobody else was listening. Then he lowered his voice. The first time we buried him, he came home. The second time, he knocked on his wife's door. The third time, we made sure he never returned." Elias almost laughed. Almost. But the old man's face showed no trace of humor. Only fear. Real fear. That afternoon, Elias visited every home in the village. Officially, he was introducing himself. Unofficially, he wanted to understand why intelligent people still believed impossible stories. Every family described the same pattern. The attacks never happened immediately. First, someone became unusually quiet. Then they stopped eating. Their skin grew pale. Dark circles formed beneath their eyes. They complained of exhaustion. Night after night, their strength slowly disappeared. Doctors blamed illness. The villagers blamed something else. Elias recognized the symptoms: malnutrition, tuberculosis, anemia. Many diseases caused weakness. No vampire required. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, he confidently returned to the small cottage provided by the church. He lit a lantern, opened one of his books, and began writing. The villagers suffer from fear more than disease. He smiled. Tomorrow, he would prove every superstition wrong. Outside, the wind carried through the forest. Branches scraped softly against the roof. Then, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Elias looked toward the door. No one in the village visited after dark. He waited. Another 3 knocks. Then, a familiar voice. "Elias." It was the village priest. "I need your help." Without thinking, Elias reached for the door. His hand stopped only inches from the handle. He suddenly remembered the villager's first warning. Never answer a voice calling your name after midnight. He laughed quietly at himself. Ridiculous. Yet, something felt wrong. The priest's voice sounded perfect. Almost. Too perfect. Then the voice spoke again. Exactly the same words, in exactly the same tone, without a single breath between them. "Elias, I need your help." For the first time since arriving in the village, the schoolteacher felt something he couldn't explain, because whatever stood outside his door wasn't speaking like a man, and it already knew his name. The voice came again. "Elias, I need your help." Not louder, not softer. Exactly the same. Every word, every pause, as though someone were repeating a perfect recording. Elias stood frozen beside the door. His hand hovered above the handle. He laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous." The priest probably needed assistance. Perhaps someone had fallen ill. Perhaps the old man was simply frightened. Elias slowly reached toward the latch. Then, he noticed something strange. There was no shadow beneath the door. His lantern burned brightly inside the cottage. Moonlight filled the path outside. Anyone standing there should have cast a shadow. There was none. The knocking stopped. Silence. Complete silence. Then, slow footsteps circled the cottage. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps never hurried. They simply walked around the house, as if examining it. The sound continued for nearly an hour. Then, nothing. At sunrise, Elias opened the door. No footprints. The ground was soft after yesterday's rain. Yet somehow, nothing had disturbed the mud. Not even the priest. Later that morning, he hurried to the church. The old priest looked exhausted. "Elias, you look pale." The young teacher frowned. "Weren't you at my cottage last night?" The priest slowly shook his head. "I haven't left the church since sunset." Elias smiled politely. "Someone used your voice." The priest didn't answer immediately. Instead, he quietly closed the church door. "I warned you. They never come first. They send your trust." Elias laughed. "You really believe something copied your voice?" The priest walked toward an ancient wooden cabinet. Inside lay several journals, each written by former priests who had served the village. Some pages were nearly 200 years old. The priest opened one carefully. "Read." Elias began reading aloud. The creature never attacked immediately. For several nights it watched. It learned voices. It learned routines. It learned who opened doors. The journal ended with a chilling sentence. Those who answered first disappeared first. Elias closed the book. "It sounds like folklore." The priest nodded. "So does every warning. Until it happens." Over the next several days, Elias paid closer attention. Not because he believed, because he wanted evidence. Every evening, the village transformed. Children disappeared indoors before sunset. Doors were reinforced with heavy wooden beams. Livestock were brought inside fenced barns. Even dogs refused to wander after dark. The forest became unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, no wolves. Almost as if every living creature knew something humans had forgotten. Then, Elias noticed another pattern. The villagers constantly watched each other, not suspiciously, carefully. If someone failed to appear one morning, everyone noticed. If someone skipped church, everyone asked why. No one was ever left alone for long. The village lived as one enormous family. It wasn't simply kindness, it was protection. One afternoon, a little girl approached Elias. "Teacher?" "Yes?" "My mother says you don't believe." He smiled. "Believe what?" She glanced toward the forest. "That they choose lonely people." Elias knelt beside her. "What do you mean?" The child spoke with complete seriousness. "They never take the happiest. They never take the loudest. They watch the quiet ones, the lonely ones, the people nobody checks on." Before Elias could answer, her mother hurried over and gently pulled her away. "Come." The woman refused to meet Elias's eyes. That evening, he sat beside his window writing notes. Perhaps the villagers were unconsciously describing disease. People living alone often became sick without anyone noticing. Isolation itself could explain many disappearances. Everything had a logical answer. Everything. Then, he saw him, a man standing perfectly still across the road. Tall, thin, dressed entirely in black. His face remained hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He wasn't looking at the houses. He was looking directly at Elias. Minutes passed. The stranger never moved, never shifted his weight, never looked away. Finally, Elias grabbed his lantern and stepped outside. The road was empty. No footsteps, no horse, no sound, only cold wind moving through the trees. The following morning, another villager failed to appear at church. His name was Stefan, a widower. He lived alone at the edge of the forest. The villagers immediately gathered. No one waited until afternoon. No one assumed he was sleeping. They walked together toward his cottage. The front door stood wide open. Breakfast remained untouched on the table. His bed had never been slept in. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no broken furniture. Only one strange detail. The window overlooking the forest was open. The villagers quietly crossed themselves. No one entered the bedroom. The priest whispered, "Close the shutters." One by one, the windows were sealed. The room grew darker. Then the gravedigger slowly pointed toward the floor. Elias looked down. Fresh, muddy footprints. They led to the window, but not away from it. The prints ended inside the room, as though someone or something had stepped in from the darkness and never walked back out. That night, the church bell rang 3 times, not for a funeral, not for a fire, but for the warning every villager feared. The hunt had begun. And for the first time, the priest handed Elias a wooden cross. Not because he expected it to stop a vampire, but because he knew something even more dangerous. Once the creature chose a victim, it almost never changed its mind. The church bell echoed across the valley. 3 slow chimes. Every villager understood what they meant. No one stepped outside. Candles were extinguished. Doors were barred. Even the animals sensed something was wrong. The horses refused to leave their stalls. Dogs whimpered beneath wooden tables. The entire village seemed to be holding its breath. Elias stood inside the church beside the priest. "You truly believe Stefan is still alive?" The old priest stared at the crucifix above the altar. "I hope he isn't." Elias frowned. "What kind of answer is that?" The priest sighed. "If he is alive, then the creature has already begun." Began what? The choosing. Elias had heard that word several times. Choosing. Not hunting. Not attacking. Choosing. He still couldn't understand the difference. The priest opened another worn journal. This is what outsiders never understood. They believe vampires hunt anyone. They don't. They choose. The old man pointed toward faded writing. The first visit is never for blood. It's for fear. According to the oldest accounts, a vampire almost never attacked immediately. Instead, it watched one person. Only one. Night after night. Learning, studying, waiting. The victim would begin seeing strange things. Someone standing outside the window. A familiar voice calling their name. Footsteps circling the house. A face disappearing behind the trees. No one else ever witnessed these events. Only the chosen victim. The priest closed the journal. Fear weakens the body. It clouds the mind. And eventually, the victim stops trusting everyone. Elias crossed his arms. Fear can certainly make someone sick. Exactly. The priest nodded, and that's why nobody believed them. Throughout history, many people who claimed they were haunted were dismissed as mad. Some probably were, but according to vampire folklore, that disbelief was exactly what the creature wanted, because isolated people became easier prey. Later that afternoon, the villagers searched the forest for Stefan. Nearly 20 men entered together. No one walked alone. Each carried an axe, a lantern, and a wooden stake, not because they expected to fight, because tradition demanded it. The forest felt strangely different. No birds sang. Even the wind seemed quieter beneath the towering pines. Thomas, the village blacksmith, suddenly stopped walking. "Listen." Everyone froze. Far away, someone was whistling, a cheerful tune, almost comforting. Elias smiled. "There. Someone's alive." He started toward the sound. The priest grabbed his arm. "No. Why not?" "Because Stefan never knew that song." The whistling continued, slowly drifting deeper into the woods, always just far enough away, always impossible to reach. One of the younger men whispered, "It's leading us." The priest ordered everyone back, immediately. No arguments. The search ended, without Stefan. As they returned to the village, Elias couldn't stop thinking. If someone truly needed help, they had abandoned him. If someone was playing tricks, why? Nothing made sense. That evening, Elias decided to conduct his own experiment. He locked every door, closed every window, placed flour across the floor near the entrance. If someone entered, they would leave footprints. Simple, logical, scientific. He smiled as he finished. Tomorrow, he would prove the entire village wrong. Midnight came. Nothing. 1 o'clock. Silence. 2. The lantern flickered. Then 3 soft knocks. Not on the front door. On the bedroom window. Elias slowly turned. Someone stood outside, only a silhouette. Tall, perfectly still. Its pale face remained hidden in darkness. It didn't knock again. It simply watched him, minute after minute. Neither moved. Then, the figure slowly smiled. Not a wide smile, a tiny one, almost as though it recognized him. The lantern suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Elias rushed to relight it. Only a few seconds passed. When the flame returned, the figure was gone. His heart pounded. He immediately examined the window, locked, untouched. He looked at the flower covering the floor. Perfect. No footprints. Nothing had entered. Nothing had left. Morning finally arrived. Elias stepped outside. His eyes widened. Fresh footprints surrounded the cottage, hundreds of them. They circled the house over and over, yet every footprint faced the building. None faced away, as though whoever made them had never stopped watching. The villagers gathered silently. No one appeared surprised, only worried. The priest looked directly at Elias. "It has chosen you." Elias forced a laugh. "Someone is trying to frighten me." The priest nodded sadly. "Yes, it is, but not because it wants you dead." He paused before speaking the next words. "It wants you afraid, because fear is the first meal." That afternoon, Elias noticed people behaving differently around him. Parents kept their children away. Neighbors ended conversations when he approached. Not because they blamed him, because everyone knew the oldest rule. Once a vampire chose someone, staying close to that person could place the entire village in danger. For the first time since arriving, Elias found himself completely alone, exactly as the little girl had warned. The creature didn't choose the strongest or the weakest. It chose the one who could be separated, the one who would slowly begin doubting himself. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains once again, Elias looked through his cottage window. Across the road, the tall stranger had returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Standing beside him were two more silent figures, watching, waiting, and none of them cast a shadow. 3 figures, standing perfectly still across the road. None of them moved, none of them spoke, and beneath the pale moonlight, none of them cast a shadow. Elias rubbed his eyes. Perhaps exhaustion had finally caught up with him. He blinked. The 3 strangers were still there, watching. Nothing more. No movement. No sound. Only their eyes. As dawn approached, they vanished. Not by walking away. Not by disappearing into the forest. One moment they were there. The next. The road stood empty. The following morning, the priest arrived carrying several old books wrapped in leather. He placed them on Elias's table. "You've seen them now." Elias nodded. "I have." The priest slowly sat down. "They've begun the second stage." "What second stage?" "The waiting." Elias frowned. "They could have attacked me already." They were only a few yards away. The priest looked directly into his eyes. "They cannot. Not yet." That answer surprised Elias. "Why not?" The old man opened one of the oldest journals. Its pages were brittle. The ink had almost faded away. Across the top, someone had written, "Rules every family must remember." The priest quietly read the first line. "Never invite the night inside," he continued. "The creature may approach. It may watch. It may imitate. But it cannot cross the threshold unless welcomed." Elias laughed softly. "So all I have to do is keep the door shut? I wish it were that simple." The priest closed the book. "Doors aren't the only thresholds." "What do you mean?" "You can invite someone with kindness, with trust, with grief, sometimes with curiosity." Throughout Europe, many ancient vampire legends shared one unusual belief. The monster wasn't simply hunting flesh, it sought permission. Sometimes spoken, sometimes implied. That belief may sound strange today, but for centuries, people took it very seriously. No stranger entered a home without being invited. No unknown traveler crossed a family's doorway freely. The custom wasn't just politeness. Many believed it was protection. That evening, Elias decided to test the legend. He left his cottage before sunset, then quietly hid inside an abandoned barn overlooking his own home. If someone came, he would finally see the truth. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Midnight arrived. The village lay silent beneath thick clouds. Then, a lone woman appeared. She wore a dark cloak. Her face remained hidden. She walked slowly toward Elias's cottage. She reached the front door. Knock, knock, knock. "My son," she whispered. "Please let me inside." Elias stared in confusion. No one answered. The woman waited, completely still. Several minutes passed. Again, 3 gentle knocks. "I'm cold. Please." Just for a moment. Still, nothing. Then something impossible happened. The woman's voice changed. Now it sounded exactly like Elias, word for word, tone for tone. "If anyone is there, please help me." Elias felt cold. It wasn't imitation. It was perfection. Finally, the figure stepped backward, slowly, gracefully, without ever turning around. Then she disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, Elias rushed to examine the cottage. The door remained locked, the windows untouched. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing had been broken. The priest simply nodded. It was waiting. For what? For you to answer. The old man looked toward the forest. Most victims don't open the door on the first night. They do it on the 10th or the 20th, when loneliness becomes stronger than caution. That answer stayed with Elias all day. The creature wasn't impatient. It understood human nature. Night after night, people became curious, then worried, then sympathetic. Eventually, someone always spoke. "Who's there?" Sometimes, that was enough. Over the following week, another pattern emerged. The stranger never visited during storms, never during festivals, never when families gathered together. It appeared only when someone sat alone, only when silence filled the house, only when hope had begun to fade. It wasn't simply choosing victims, it was choosing moments, moments when people were grieving, moments when they were desperate, moments when they wanted to believe someone had returned. One afternoon, Elias visited the widow Anna. Her husband had died the previous winter. She quietly admitted something she had never told anyone. "Every night, I hear him outside. My husband. He asks me to let him in." Elias's heartbeat quickened. "What do you do?" She smiled sadly. "I cry. But I never answer." Then she looked toward an old portrait hanging above the fireplace. "It doesn't sound exactly like him. It sounds like my memory of him." That single sentence changed everything. The creature wasn't merely copying voices. It was learning emotions, learning loss, learning love. It understood exactly which words each person longed to hear. As sunset approached, the village gathered inside the church, not to pray, to compare stories. Nearly every family had heard something different. One heard a dead child, another heard a missing brother, another heard a mother's voice. The creature never repeated the same trick twice. It offered each victim exactly what they wanted most. The priest looked around the room. It doesn't need permission from the mouth. It needs permission from the heart. The church fell silent. Outside, 3 slow knocks echoed against the wooden doors. No one moved. The knocking stopped. Then, a little girl standing near the altar whispered in terror, "My mother is outside." Every villager turned toward the child's real mother, who was already standing beside her. The little girl pointed again. "No, my other mother." From beyond the church doors, a gentle voice called softly, "Sweetheart, come outside. I've been waiting for you." Every candle inside the church suddenly went out, and for the first time, someone knocked from inside the building. The knocking came again, not from outside the church, from beneath the wooden floor. 3 slow knocks, then silence. No one dared breathe. The little girl clung to her mother's dress. "I heard it. It was under us." The priest raised his lantern. "No one moves." He slowly walked toward the center of the church. The ancient wooden floor creaked beneath his feet. Another knock. This time, directly beneath the altar. Elias followed cautiously. Someone could be trapped below. The priest grabbed his arm. "No! There is no room beneath this church." Elias frowned. "Then where did it come from?" The old priest whispered, "Exactly." The knocking stopped, but something worse replaced it. A voice, soft, weak, almost impossible to hear. Elias, it sounded like his mother. She had died nearly 10 years earlier. He froze. Impossible. His mother couldn't be here. Yet every word, every breath, every tiny pause was exactly as he remembered. "My son, I've missed you." Elias felt tears filling his eyes. For one brief moment, he wasn't standing inside an old church. He was a frightened child again. The priest suddenly struck the wooden floor with the end of his staff. The voice vanished instantly. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. The priest looked directly at Elias. "Did you recognize it?" Elias nodded slowly. "My mother." The priest sighed. "It finally knows you." That sentence chilled him more than the voice itself. "It knows me. It knows what hurts you." According to many ancient vampire legends, the creature didn't simply observe its victims, it studied them, their routines, their fears, their greatest regrets. The longer it watched, the more convincing its deception became. Its greatest weapon wasn't its teeth. It was memory. The villagers believed a vampire could never create emotions. It simply reflected the ones already living inside its victim. That afternoon, the priest led Elias into a locked room beneath the church tower. Dust covered every shelf. Hundreds of handwritten journals filled the walls. Each belonged to a different priest. Some dated back more than 4 centuries. One journal described the same pattern over and over. Night 1. The victim hears footsteps. Night 3. The victim hears a familiar voice. Night 7. The victim begins answering. Night 12. The victim sees loved ones. Night 15. The victim stops trusting reality. Elias quietly closed the book. "Did anyone survive?" The priest answered honestly. "Some did." "How?" "They stopped believing what they wanted to hear." That answer lingered in Elias's mind. As evening approached, he noticed the village changing again. People no longer traveled alone. Meals were shared by entire families. Even sleeping alone became forbidden. Every home welcomed relatives. Neighbors crowded together around fireplaces. Not because they enjoyed company, because loneliness had become dangerous. The vampire rarely chose crowded homes. It preferred silence, isolation, a single mind with no one nearby to question what it had seen. As darkness covered the mountains, Elias refused to remain indoors. He wanted proof, real proof. Lantern in hand, he walked toward the cemetery. The village watched him leave. No one tried to stop him. They simply prayed. The cemetery stood silent beneath the moon. Dozens of crooked crosses cast long shadows. Cold mist drifted between the graves. Then he heard laughter. Children laughing. Impossible. No children played outside after sunset. He raised the lantern. The laughter stopped. A tiny figure stood beside the oldest grave. A little boy, barefoot, wearing clothes from another century. "Elias," the child smiled. "You're late." Elias slowly stepped closer. "Who are you?" The boy tilted his head. "I used to live here." "Used to?" The child nodded. "Before it chose me." The lantern flame suddenly flickered. For the first time, Elias noticed something horrifying. The boy's feet weren't touching the ground. He floated only an inch above the grass, perfectly still. Without thinking, Elias took another step. The child smiled wider. "Come closer. I want to show you something." Another step, then another. The cemetery behind him disappeared into thick fog. The church vanished. The village vanished. Only the child remained, still smiling, still floating. Then, someone grabbed Elias from behind. The priest. He pulled Elias backward with incredible force. "Don't look into its eyes!" Elias stumbled onto the ground. The child was gone. So was the fog. The cemetery looked completely normal again. The priest was breathing heavily. "You almost followed." "Followed where?" The priest looked toward the forest. "It doesn't matter. Nobody who follows ever finds the way back." Elias stared at the empty grave. For the first time since arriving, he wasn't searching for scientific explanations anymore. Because science could explain illness, it could explain fear, it could explain grief. But it couldn't explain how an empty cemetery had almost convinced him to willingly disappear into the darkness, and hidden somewhere beyond the trees, something had just learned its most dangerous lesson yet. Elias was finally beginning to believe. Elias didn't sleep. Not that night. Not the next one. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the floating child smiling from the cemetery. The priest remained beside him inside the church. "You understand now?" Elias nodded slowly. "I understand that something is happening. But I still don't understand why." The old priest lit another candle. "Because it hasn't finished with you." Outside, the wind howled through the village. The church bell remained silent. No one dared ring it after midnight. The villagers believed something else, listened for bells. Something that counted. The priest unfolded an old map across the wooden table. Every house in the village had been marked, some with black ink, others with faded red circles. Elias pointed. "What do these mean?" The priest answered quietly. "Every family that was ever chosen." Elias looked closer. Some houses had one circle, others had several. Then he noticed something impossible. One cottage had been marked 12 different times. "The same house?" The priest nodded. "It returned there for nearly 80 years. But everyone living there died." "Exactly." Elias frowned. "Then why keep returning?" The priest stared toward the window. "Because vampires didn't hunt houses. They hunted bloodlines." That answer settled over the room like ice. According to some of the oldest vampire traditions, a creature often became obsessed with one family. Generation after generation, a grandfather, then a son, then a granddaughter. The attacks could be separated by decades. Sometimes, the creature simply waited for another generation to grow old enough. It wasn't choosing homes, it was choosing descendants. The journals described dozens of similar cases, families that mysteriously vanished over centuries. Not all at once, one person at a time, always beginning with the same signs: sleepless nights, strange voices, then someone standing outside the window. Elias looked back at the map. Why would it choose one family? The priest shook his head. No one ever discovered the answer. The next afternoon, the entire village gathered at the church, not for worship, for counting. Every single person answered their name aloud, one after another. Children, parents, grandparents, no exceptions. If someone failed to answer, everyone went searching immediately. No one was ever left unaccounted for overnight. The priest explained, the creature succeeds when people disappear quietly. We don't allow quiet disappearances. That evening, Elias volunteered to watch the widow Anna's house. If the creature truly returned night after night, he wanted to witness it himself. The widow sat alone beside her fireplace. Her husband's portrait rested on the mantel. She hadn't smiled in months. As darkness covered the valley, Elias waited outside among the trees. An hour passed. Nothing. Then, the front porch creaked. Someone had stepped onto it. Elias looked carefully. A man stood at the door, broad shoulders, grey beard, weathered face. Anna opened the curtain. Her body froze. She whispered only one word. Michael. It was her husband, the man who had died the previous winter. He looked exactly as he had in the portrait. Not older, not younger. Exactly the same. He smiled gently. I came home. Anna's hand slowly reached for the door. Elias sprinted across the yard. No! She looked back at him in confusion. But it's him. It isn't. The man outside never argued, never became angry. He simply smiled. Anna, I'm cold. Please, let me come home. His voice was filled with sadness, not menace, not rage, just loneliness. For one terrifying moment, even Elias wanted to believe him. Then he noticed something. The man's eyes never blinked, not once. The widow's hand trembled on the latch. Tears streamed down her face. I've missed you, the stranger answered softly. I know. Open the door. Elias grabbed her arm. Look at his feet. She looked down. The smile disappeared from her face. The man standing on the porch wasn't casting a shadow, and beneath his boots, fresh snow remained perfectly untouched. He wasn't standing on it. He was standing above it. Only an inch. But enough. Anna gasped. The stranger's expression changed instantly. His kindness vanished. For a single heartbeat, his face twisted into something ancient. His skin stretched tightly across sharp bones. His eyes became completely black. Rows of needle-like teeth flashed behind thin lips. Then, he smiled again. The gentle husband had returned. I'll come back tomorrow. He stepped backward into the darkness. 1 step, 2, 3. Then, he was gone. Anna collapsed into tears. I almost opened it. The priest arrived moments later. He wasn't surprised. He'll return. Tomorrow? Elias asked. The priest nodded. And the night after? And the night after that? They don't rush. They let hope do the work. Over the following week, the stranger appeared every single night, always polite, always calm, never threatening. Some nights he looked like Anna's husband. Other nights, he became her father. Once, he even appeared as the little daughter she had buried years before. Each visit lasted only a few minutes. Then he disappeared before dawn. The creature wasn't changing its victim anymore. It was changing its disguise. Whatever stood outside that house already knew every face Anna had ever loved. Then, on the 8th night, something happened that none of the journals had ever described. The stranger didn't knock. He simply stood in the yard, looking directly past Anna's cottage, looking at Elias. Then he slowly smiled and raised one pale hand, pointing toward the schoolteacher. The priest's face lost all color. It isn't watching Anna anymore. It's finished learning. It has chosen its next victim. The stranger never looked away. Standing at the edge of the snow-covered road, he pointed directly at Elias. Then, without making a sound, he disappeared into the darkness. No footsteps, no footprints, nothing. The priest slowly lowered his lantern. His hands were shaking. It has never done that before. Elias stared into the empty night. What does it mean? The priest answered without hesitation. It knows you understand. For the first time, Elias wasn't simply being watched, he was being acknowledged. The following morning, the village woke before sunrise. Every family hurried outdoors. Not because the danger had passed, because dawn revealed what darkness tried to hide. The priest led Elias to the edge of the forest. There, fresh footprints, hundreds of them. They circled the village, every house, every barn, every stable, yet none entered the village itself. They stopped exactly where the first fence began. Elias knelt beside one of the prints. It never crossed. No. The priest nodded. It waited. Ancient vampire legends often described an unusual pattern. The creature rarely rushed into a village. It circled, watching, learning who lived where, who argued, who grieved, who prayed, who stayed awake. It gathered information long before choosing anyone. Elias followed the trail. The footprints eventually vanished beneath a massive oak tree. Nothing stood there. Only frozen earth. He searched every inch of the area. Nothing. No cave, no hidden path, no explanation. That afternoon, Elias began reading every journal stored beneath the church. One entry caught his attention. It had been written nearly 100 years earlier. Never assume daylight makes you safe. He frowned. Every story he had ever heard claimed vampires feared sunlight, yet the journals suggested something different. He hurried to the priest. These writings say they walk during the day. The old man nodded. They can. Elias looked stunned. But every stories change. The priest interrupted gently. The oldest legends are different. According to many early accounts, sunlight didn't always destroy a vampire. Instead, it weakened them. They became slower, more cautious, less powerful, but not helpless. That belief disappeared centuries later as stories evolved. The villagers never assumed sunrise meant safety. They believed daylight only made the creature less dangerous, not harmless. That afternoon, Elias noticed a traveler entering the village, a tall man leading a black horse. He wore expensive clothes, unlike anyone nearby. He smiled politely at everyone. "I'm looking for shelter." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. No one answered. The traveler seemed perfectly ordinary. Warm skin, normal shadow, friendly voice. Still, no family invited him inside. Finally, the priest offered him food, outside, on a wooden table. The traveler smiled. "You don't trust strangers?" The priest replied calmly. "We trust time." The man laughed. A wise answer. He finished eating, mounted his horse, and rode away. Elias watched him disappear over the hill. That seemed rude. The priest quietly replied, "Perhaps. But everyone appears ordinary during the day." That sentence stayed with Elias. Not every danger announced itself. Some smiled. Some shook your hand. Some thanked you for your kindness. The oldest legends rarely described vampires as monsters hiding inside castles. Many described them as travelers, merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, people who blended perfectly into ordinary life. They hunted with patience, not violence. As sunset approached, snow began falling heavily across the mountains. Visibility dropped. The village disappeared beneath white silence. Children hurried indoors, doors closed. Candles glowed behind frosted windows. Elias remained awake inside the church, watching, waiting. Midnight arrived. Nothing. 1 o'clock. Silence. 2. The church door slowly creaked open, not from someone entering, from the wind, or so Elias thought. Then, a little boy walked inside, alone, barefoot. His clothes were soaked with melting snow. "Elias?" the boy whispered. "I got lost." The teacher rushed toward him. "Where are your parents?" The child began crying. "I can't find them." Elias reached for the boy's hand. The priest shouted across the church. "Stop!" Elias froze. The old man slowly approached the child. "What's your mother's name?" The boy looked confused. "I don't remember." "And your father's?" Silence. The priest asked another question. "What village are you from?" Again. Silence. The crying stopped instantly. The child slowly lifted his head. His tears vanished. So did the sadness. He smiled, a smile far too old for a child. Then he spoke. Not in a child's voice, but in the deep voice of an old man. "I'm getting closer." The lanterns throughout the church exploded into darkness. For several terrifying seconds, no one could see. When the candles were finally relit, the child had disappeared. Only small, wet footprints remained across the stone floor. They led directly to the altar and ended there, as though the child had simply ceased to exist. The priest knelt beside the final footprint. His face turned pale. "It's changing," Elias swallowed. "What is?" "The rules." For centuries, the creature had always remained outside, always waited, always asked. But tonight, something had entered the church without permission. And if the oldest rules no longer protected the village, then every story they had trusted was about to become useless. The church remained silent. Only the wet footprints broke the stillness. They began at the entrance, crossed the stone floor, stopped before the altar. Then, they simply ended. No footprints led away. No hidden door stood nearby. Nothing explained how the child had vanished. Elias knelt beside the final print. The stone beneath it was icy cold, much colder than the winter air. The priest whispered, "Don't touch it." Too late. Elias's fingers had already brushed the wet mark. A sudden pain shot through his arm, not sharp, cold, like plunging his hand into frozen water. He pulled back immediately. The footprint began evaporating. Within seconds, it disappeared completely. The priest closed his eyes. "It knows your scent now." Elias looked confused. "My scent?" The oldest journals describe it differently. They called it the mark of recognition. According to several forgotten legends, a vampire rarely attacked strangers. It preferred people it had already touched, not with claws, not with fangs, with contact, a handshake, a footprint, a borrowed object, something small enough that the victim never noticed. The villagers believed that once the creature established this connection, finding its victim became effortless. Distance no longer mattered. Forests, mountains, locked doors. None of them could hide someone who had already been marked. The following morning, Elias searched every journal beneath the church. One fragile book had been written nearly 500 years earlier. Its final pages described something no one else had mentioned. The creature never enters by force. It convinces. Every victim believes the final decision was their own. Elias read the passage twice. That single sentence changed everything. The vampire wasn't breaking into homes. It was persuading people to let down their guard. It waited until exhaustion defeated caution, until grief defeated reason, until loneliness defeated fear. Then, the victim opened the door willingly, not because they had been overpowered, because they had been convinced. That afternoon, the village blacksmith arrived at the church. His wife had disappeared. No blood, no struggle, no broken furniture. Only an empty chair beside the fireplace. The priest immediately asked one question. "Was she alone yesterday?" The blacksmith lowered his head. "I had to travel to the next village. When I returned, she was gone." Everyone fell silent. Another person, another empty house. Elias insisted on examining the cottage. Inside, everything appeared perfectly normal. Dinner still rested on the table. A half-finished blanket lay beside the fire. Nothing suggested panic. Then Elias noticed something unusual. The front door remained locked from the inside. No window had been opened, no roof tiles disturbed. It was impossible. The woman had vanished from a sealed house, until he noticed a small message scratched into the wooden table. 3 simple words. "I let him." Elias stared at the writing. The letters had been carved slowly, carefully. There were no signs of struggle, only acceptance. The priest quietly covered the words with a cloth. "It always ends like this." Elias turned. "She invited it?" "No." The priest shook his head. She believed she was inviting someone else. That night, Elias refused to remain inside. If the creature wanted him, he would force it into the open, lantern in one hand, wooden stake in the other. He walked alone toward the old cemetery. The priest begged him not to go. "You'll never outwait something that has all of eternity." But Elias kept walking. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The moon hung low over the mountain peaks. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then he heard music, a violin. Soft, beautiful. It drifted through the trees like a forgotten memory. He followed it. The melody became clearer, closer. Soon, he reached a small clearing. In the center stood a young woman wearing a white dress. She played the violin without looking at him. The music was hauntingly familiar. "My sister," Elias whispered. It was the song his older sister had played before dying from fever years earlier. The woman stopped playing. She smiled gently. "I've missed you." Elias's heart pounded. "No, you aren't real." She stepped closer. Neither her feet nor her dress disturbed the snow. "I know you miss them. Your mother, your sister, your home." Her voice was calm, almost comforting. "You don't have to be lonely anymore." For one dangerous moment, Elias lowered the stake. The woman's smile widened. She extended her hand. "Come, just one step." Elias's hand began reaching toward hers. Then, the church bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed across the mountains. The woman suddenly froze. Her smile disappeared. For the first time, anger crossed her face. Not rage, disappointment, as though someone had interrupted years of careful planning. Her eyes slowly changed. The warm brown color faded into endless black. Her skin became pale as bone. Long fangs appeared behind thin lips. Then, she spoke in a voice that no longer sounded human. "You were almost mine." The wind exploded through the clearing. Snow swirled into the air. Elias shielded his eyes. When the storm settled, the woman had vanished. Only the violin remained, lying alone in the snow. Elias cautiously picked it up. It wasn't made of wood. It was carved from something pale, smooth, and horrifyingly familiar. The priest arrived moments later. One glance at the instrument drained the color from his face. He whispered only 4 words. "That isn't a violin." Elias looked down. His hands began trembling, because the instrument had been carved entirely from human bones